How did the story of biology begin? Well, first of all, one needs to have a clear idea of what one is going to be dealing with. So let's begin with the closest living thing around you, the human body, your body. Then the question is, why are we going to be dealing with it? Well, the human body is a complicated system, and complicated things often run the risk of malfunction, and in this case, diseases. Okay, so this sets the stage. Talking of diseases, the story takes us to the mid-1800s. However, we shall be going to and fro every once in a while for a richer perspective. The story begins with young Rudolf Virchow, who later was regarded as the father of pathology, walking into the premises of the prestigious Friedrich Wilhelm Institute in Germany. He wanted to study medicine. But in the mid-1800s, as Virchow began his study in Germany, there were barely any major advances in medicine. The exception, of course, was anatomy. It is better to say that in the mid-1800s, the world of medicine was divided into two halves, anatomy and pathology. The first was in better shape. Anatomy was in better shape. The second half was pathology, and it was, poverty-stricken. In pretty bad shape. The anatomy was in good shape because by the time Virchow began his study, systematic anatomy had aged about 300 years. It had gotten matured in these 300 years. 300 years ago, that is, in 1533, systematic anatomy began when Andreas Vesalius arrived in a hospital to practice surgery. To his surprise, and quite to our own surprise as well, as we shall see, he found out that barely anyone knew anything about surgical anatomy. Things were in absolute disarray. Most so-called surgeons of the time depended on 1500 years old Roman physician Galen for his poor human body sketches for the procedure. This handbook of Galen on anatomy was badly outdated and incorrect. Inside the basement of the hospital that Vesalius joined, dead human bodies were dissected recklessly. Professors used to sit on high chairs passing orders while uneducated barbers, and literally barbers, chopped human bodies and ripped human organs as if pulling out cotton stuffing from a toy. No surprise, Vesalius compared the entire setting of the hospital to a stinking meat market. A newbie medical student in Paris, Vesalius was disappointed. He took it upon himself the task of systematically mapping the whole human body. He began raiding the hospital basements to collect the remains of human corpses and bring them to his laboratory for study. He began sneaking the graveyards for human bones so that he could map the skeletal system. He even didn't mind going to the gallows, where prisoners' corpses used to dangle post-mortem. A freshly hanging corpse was, a delight because that meant intact organs, making study easier. He would cut open the brain into horizontal sections like watermelon. This allowed him to create the kind of drawings that modern CAT or MRI scanners can produce. He worked constantly for 10 years, sometimes collaborating with the Italian painter John von Kalkar to create amazing drawings of human anatomy. Finally, in 1543, he published his book in a total of 7 volumes, the Humani, Corporis, Fabrica, the fabric of human body. Since then, human body was no longer treated as a mystery. It had a physical material inside, a fabric inside, not spirit. The book had a whopping 700 illustrations. It was going to revolutionize the world. And just to spit out an interesting fact that I think you should know, the Revolutions of Nicolaus Copernicus was published in the same year in 1543. So far so good. Human anatomy became a serious subject to be studied by doctors, thanks to Vesalius. Apart from anatomy, another important field that ought to be studied by doctors is pathology, the study of diseases. People have been dying of diseases for ages. The question was, what caused a disease? No one knew anything with definite clarity. There was no theory to explain diseases. During the 1600s and 1700s, some people thought that poisonous gases were the cause of disease. like the gases emanating from sewage water and waste disposal areas. This kind of gas was called miasmas. People thought that this gas, when inhaled, caused diseases. I found it interesting that the word malaria had nothing to do with mosquitoes. Rather, it originally meant mal air or bad air. And why not? Diseases mostly attacked areas that smelled horrible. And let's not forget that it was a time of industrial revolution. People arrived in cities from their rural backgrounds in search of jobs. Cities were packed with people and the waste that they produced. Syphilis and tuberculosis attacked most homes. Childbirth was a nightmare, mostly resulting in deaths. But why? Some doctors believed in the theory of miasmas, or disease-filled gas. Others believed that diseases were caused by malfunction of maybe the kidney or the liver or some other organ. Many others believed that the diseases were caused by an imbalance of bodily fluids, what they called humor. And again, some psychics believed that it was mental frustration that caused diseases. In the 1700s, there was no systematic explanation of why and how diseases happen and kill a person. If you have a disease, you'll soon be diseased. Creepy, isn't it? So you see, disease and the cause of disease was a big mystery. How can one begin to think about diseases? Where to begin? If disease is due to a dysfunction of some individual organ, is this dysfunction the actual problem, or is it an epiphenomena? In other words, is the occurrence of dysfunction of an organ due to some hidden cause not visible to the human eye? It is like saying if the whole is made up of parts, then surely we should begin to study the parts so that, well, one day we can add them together and understand the whole. That is a logical step, a reductionist approach. I mean, just like the various properties of matter were the mere emergent properties of its invisible particles and molecules and atoms and their configuration, maybe the disease is the zone the human body slips into once something goes wrong at the microscopic level. Do you remember the beginning of this video? We were talking about how anatomy had already undergone maturation for 300 years when Rudolf Virchow, the father of pathology, entered the scene. Generation after generation of people had perfected anatomy for over 300 years, since the time of Vesalius. The 18-year-old Virchow had inherited a mature anatomy. But even in his time, in the mid-1800s, pathology was utterly immature. The causes of disease was a grey zone. In 1843, Virchow began to work with the German Robert Florey, a pathologist himself. Florey's collaboration offered the passionate Virchow his microscopes and a large curation of pathological specimens to study. Virchow was obsessed with finding out in a systematic way how diseases happen exactly. He was passionate and obsessed. He finally and luckily had found out what was his calling in life. But how to proceed? To this question, Rudolf Virchow replied, "I am my own advisor. If no one is going to lead me, I will lead myself." That is courage, driven by the passion to enter the unknown waters. Wow, that is the sheer beauty of a scientific heart. Notice, here is a picture of humanity marching into the depths of science for the first time without any guide. If cellular pathology did not exist, he would invent this entire field of medicine from scratch. Only a deeply passionate heart has the confidence to climb uphill. I always like to emphasize passion and obsession in studying something deep. It is like without passion and obsession, a scientist's life is like living inside a prison. A passionate heart is a flight that takes you beyond the prison walls of this mundane life. Rudolf Virchow was about to create the entire field of cellular pathology from scratch, just like Andreas Vesalius created the entire field of systematic anatomy from, well, dead bodies. This first installment of a series of videos was about two men, both infected with obsessive curiosity. Both wanted to become doctors, and when they saw that the medicine of their time was in poor state, they both endeavored to make it better, to make it richer. The story was really the story of how two medical students became, well, scientists. What happened next is the story of microscopes, how they helped Virchow in studying diseases and how they revolutionized biology. This is the subject of the next video.